the likelihood that it's going to happen. It's exactly that, but in reverse, that historians are doing when they say, we can only trace and weigh human activities and events if there have been invasions from beyond the historical nexus of human mortal actions. We just don't know how to trace them because they happen to look just like myths. Even if they happened. Let me just give you two other opinions. I think this was even Bultmann's point of view. It was not Bob Funk's. Bob would quote Bultmann meaning, yeah, we believe in naturalism. I'm not sure Bultmann meant that, but I can't help thinking what Rudolf Otto said about it, who was one of the great history of religion critics. He said this cuts both ways. We don't have any kind of verifiable recent or current documented instances from people whose standards we would accept of guys hopping out of a boat and walking on water, changing water into wine, coming out of the grave a few days later. If we did, that might change. But as it is now, the only reports and stories we have that look like that happen to be myths, as anybody else would admit. Warfield was certainly not quick to defend the miracles of Gautama the Buddha, even though some of them are very similar to New Testament ones. On the other hand, there was Karl Barth, who, as I understand him, said Jesus Christ came out of that grave on the third day. It really happened. But as historians who were not there, there is no way we can prove that or even make it look likely. As those who accept the preached gospel of Christianity, we believe it. It's not a historical judgment. It's a response to the preaching of Christ. It did happen. He says, as I understand him, he wasn't fiddling around with some kind of half-baked thing where it happened in the history of meaning but not real. No. As I understand him, if you had your video camera, you'd have picked it up, but nobody did, and we can't do it now. That's, I think, the point of the principle of analogy. And yes, it does mean that you can disqualify a lot of evidence for a lot of supernatural reports that look more like myths. But the other side, I'm sorry, I skipped the Rudolf Otto thing, as I was about to say. Otto says there are plenty of gospel stories that are paralleled. Did Jesus cast out demons? Well, we weren't there, but it's certainly not a problem to imagine he did, because you can go to plenty of exorcism meetings today and see the same stuff happening. Whether you think it's aberrant psychology or actual demons, that's another issue. But if you want to see gospel-like events, so I can tell you where to go to see them. If you want to see divine healing lines and all that, they're not uncommon. You can see them on TV. Now, is that really happening? Could you verify it if you've got the amazing Randy in to check out Jesus? Who knows? It's too late for that. But the point is, if we see gospel stories where things that are still happening today happen then, that's no problem. There's no bias about the supernaturalism except that it doesn't leave readable fingerprints if it happens. The believer may imagine he has some alternate epistemological access to these things, but I think it's just faith or the will to believe. It's just that history can't decide this. That doesn't mean you've proven it didn't happen, right? It's just that you can't give it the seal of, yeah, probably true. You just have to say, who knows? We weren't there. Now, but is the goal of talking about the truth of the Bible the issue of whether you can prove the truth of the Bible? I would not think it is. A couple of other things that Jim said. Are theories of authorship rendered unduly speculative because one doesn't believe in miracles if one doesn't? And again, I don't. If somebody tells me my aunt went to a healing rally, she had cancer, they verified that she did, and then they verified she didn't, I say, that is great. I don't say you lying, is so-and-so. I don't know what goes on in the universe. I'm not the paradigm police. And I don't think historians are either. Just what's the evidence? Does my approach to the principle of analogy, etc., lead to total historical skepticism? Yes and no. One thing that all historians will tell you is that the further back you go, and it doesn't have to be very far, you're going to have to be content with provisional, tentative judgments. And they keep coming up with evidence that, like Tutankhamun, the pharaoh, they say, oh, he was murdered, you can tell because of the skull, this and that. Now they did some sort of DNA test. Oh, he wasn't murdered, he had this kind of disease. Well, I don't invest much in that, but you always have to say, tentatively, we think this happened. Now, more recently, we don't. My father was present with General Patton's army during the liberation of Dachau. He told me about the horrors he had seen, and he decided that since they're Holocaust denial nuts, he would, for the sake of anybody that might read it, write down what he saw in Dachau. And then, scant weeks later, they happened to release what's his name? The guy that did It's a Wonderful Life. Frank Capra's color footage of Dachau's liberation. Darn, it wasn't exactly like my father had said. He remembered real well. Well, in a case like that, the Holocaust deniers are just nuts. There's no way to make their view to prove it or make it even look remotely probable, because luckily we're still close enough to those events. You get back to the Napoleonic War, there's no serious doubt, but it starts getting fuzzy on this or that. You go back to the ancient world, it gets real fuzzy, and all you can do is to say tentatively, seems to me the evidence points in this direction, but if you find something new, bring it on. There's no room for dogma on that. And so I would say the further back you go, right, everything has to be held open. You just can't dogmatize about that. Even Dachau, even that is probabilistic. It's just that the evidence is so massive and from all sides that it's just 99.999999 that's probable. But, you go further and it gets foggier. So that's the radical character of it. I don't know what on earth could possibly suffice to defend or prove that Moses divided the Red Sea, as in the Charlton Heston movie, even if it happened. How on earth could you possibly even begin, short of a trip in a time machine, to make that likely? You're just going to have to believe that or not. It's a question of theology, which I'm not ridiculing. It's just not a historical judgment. Though we weren't there, we know it didn't happen, right? The negative, whatever, skeptical critics don't say that, or if they do, they're just bigots. I don't know how they claim to know that. Is it inconsistency to suggest that the gospel writers would have drawn upon the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, and Homer and Euripides and some others, as I think they plainly did? Not at all, once you remind yourself of the cosmopolitan character of Judaism, especially diaspora Judaism in the Roman Empire in the century